imagine how happy I am, and I'm sure how happy Zimbabweans are around the world at this historic day.
Did you ever think this would happen? Did you ever see this coming?
You know, I was born just a few years before independence, and the only leader that I have known is Mr. Mugabe. And now that era has ended, I would never have imagined that it would happen in my lifetime. We were, in the last few years, beginning to feel that he would be there forever, that he would die in office. But you know what? Tribute has to be given to the people of Zimbabwe who have fought over the years. Many people have died. Many people have lost limbs. Many people have lost property in pursuit of a day like today. To see Mr. Mugabe finally out of office is something that is completely incredible, something that a lot of Zimbabweans cherish. Of course, you know, they will look forward to a better future, but they deserve the party that they are having today. We deserve to party, we deserve to be happy, to see what may be the end of an era.
What do you think was it that finally forced him to resign? What was it at the beginning of the impeachment process?
You know, the impeachment process was something that she could not take for the simple reason that even though he would have been allowed an opportunity to represent himself, to be heard, to answer questions, and perhaps to even ask witnesses from the other side, I don't think that he would have loved that spectacle. It would have been so humiliating for him that he decided that it wasn't worth it. But you know, the game changer was what happened last week with the military intervening. That was the key to the change that we are seeing today, because the military had been the platform upon which he had built his power. They were supporting him for many years at a time when the opposition, the MDC, was winning, when the MDC was beating him, but they would always come to his aid. Now, of course, they took away that power and he was left with nothing. And that left him in a position where he really was under pressure. And over the last few days, we were saying that Mr. Mugabe's friends need to help him in order to protect himself from himself, because he was no longer looking after himself, no longer looking after Zimbabweans. He was becoming a danger to himself. And finally, the penny has dropped and he's now off the stage.
And what now of the future of Zimbabwe? One dictator is gone. Is there a danger that another dictator could come and take his place, or is democracy here to stay after all these people taking to the streets and demonstrating in their, well, I'm going to guess, hundreds of thousands?
You know what, today is a day for Zimbabweans to party, to be happy, and they'll be looking forward to a better future. I remember the words of one of the heroes of the liberation struggle, called General Josiah Tangwagara. He said at the time of Ian Smith that he wasn't fighting Ian Smith, the person, but he was fighting the system. And I believe that those words are so important even today, because the fight that Zimbabweans have had is not just against one person, Robert Mugabe, but it's against a system that he has created over the past 37 years. It is that system that needs to be broken down. Of course, it's so important that Mr. Mugabe is now gone, but we have to continue as Zimbabweans to build, and those who are coming through should be able to show leadership, should be able to learn from the mistakes that Mr. Mugabe made and be able to correct them and do things that are completely different from what we have seen in the last 30 years. If they can do that, if they can be inclusive, if they can be forward-looking, if they can engage with the international community, if they can do things in a completely different way from what Mr. Mugabe was doing, I think there's so much hope for Zimbabwe, because it's a beautiful country. It's a country that has people with talent, so much resources, and a willingness to do the right thing. They just need to be given space, and of course to expand the democratic space for people to freely express themselves like they did on Saturday last week. If they can be allowed to do that, I think Zimbabwe will flourish and will become a great example for the African continent, and indeed for the world in the next few years.
To the impeachment, everything, the people's voices. I want to thank the activists who've been going on. Our lives have been in danger, but we've been going on. We didn't stop. We've been followed. I mean, I'm from Bulawayo. Every day there's somebody following me. My family is scared for my life. I'm scared for my life. My 13-year-old daughter sent me a message and said, "Mom, we still want you alive," because we've been fighting for this. We've been fighting for. We're so glad he's gone. So
Robert Gabriel Mugabe was a revolutionary leader who fought in the liberation struggle against white minority rule.
And bear true allegiance to Zimbabwe.
His tight grip on power earned him the title of being the oldest head of state in the world. The 93-year-old leader has been in power since Zimbabwe's independence in 1980. He has continued his life as an international statesman despite a diminishing reputation as Zimbabwe's economy crumbled amid corruption and violence. Mugabe's rise to power began in 1979 when the Lancaster House Agreement ended white minority rule. At first, he protected minority rights. But in the 2000s, he changed tack. He led a chaotic land reform program, including redistributing land from white farmers without compensation. The country's economy collapsed with runaway inflation figures. The central bank printed money on a massive scale. Supermarket shelves were empty. A loaf of bread would cost you trillions to buy. Mugabe's misrule prompted widespread protests. That was the birth of the opposition MDC, led by trade unionist Morgan Tsvangirai, who later entered into a power-sharing agreement with Mugabe following a disputed election. The economic climate was unbearable, something it is still struggling to recover from. Millions of Zimbabweans crossed the border into neighboring South Africa looking for a better life. He tried to pave the way for his wife, Grace Mugabe, to be his successor. The army found that unacceptable, saying that this is not a dynasty. Milton Nkosi, BBC News, Southern Africa.